Hey, it's Jay, and it's time for me to review It Chapter 1. So without further ado, let's get into the plot. So in October of 1988, a boy named Bill Dunbrow, played by Jaden Martell, makes a boat for his little brother Georgie to go outside and play since it's a rainy day and he's feeling sick. Georgie is out following the boat as it runs through the current on the side of the road, and it ends up falling into the sewer, much to Georgie's dismay because he thinks that Bill's going to be very angry at him for losing it. As he tries to retrieve it, he notices a pair of eyes looking back at him, and it is revealed to be a clown, who introduces himself as Pennywise, the dancing clown, played by Bill Skarsgård. He kind of lures George into a false sense of security by making funny popcorn noises and talking about how there's a circus down there and all sorts of fun stuff. And, tells Georgie, come get your boat. I have it right here. You can go, but don't forget your boat. And when Georgie reaches in to retrieve the boat, Pennywise rips his arm off, bites his arm off, and drags him into the sewer, thus killing Georgie. So don't talk to strangers, kids. That's all I gotta say to that. Hey, it's Jay, and it's time for me to review It Chapter 2. So, without further ado, let's get into the plot. So, in 2016, in Derry, Maine, a homosexual couple is harassed by some homophobic residents of Derry. And they attack and eventually throw one of them over the edge. His name was Adrian Mellon, and his boyfriend Don witnesses Adrian be rescued by some creature, I should say, which is revealed to be Pennywise, and Pennywise eats his heart, literally bites his heart out of his chest, and witnesses that. Mike Hanlon, who never left Derry, calls up all his old losers. Mike Hanlon is now played by Isaiah Mustafa, and he calls up all his old buddies to come back to Derry to defeat it. So the following summer, Bill and his friends, Richie Tozier, played by Finn Wolford, Eddie Kazbrak, played by Jack Dylan Grazer, and Stanley Uris, played by Wyatt Oleff, are tormented by Henry Bowers and his gang. Henry Bowers, played by Nicholas Hamilton. Bill is still very torn up over the loss of his brother and is kind of crazed and obsessed as to try to figure out what went wrong, what happened, because he doesn't believe that Georgie is dead. And he calculates that following the sewer's patterns and the pipes will lead him to a place called the Barrens. He enlists the help of Richie, Eddie, and Stan to go with him to see if they can try to find his body. At the same time, a new kid in town by the name of Ben Hanscom, played by Jeremy Ray Taylor, is a very fat kid who is obsessed with learning about town's history because he's constantly moving. And he learns that many tragedies have taken place in this town of Derry. He's heavily targeted by Bowers and his gang, and they eventually catch up with him. Henry showing his crazed side by trying to carve his name into his stomach. Ben escapes and meets up with the other four boys in the Barrens, and they find the shoe of a girl who went missing by the name of Betty Ripson. And so they added a new friend to the group called the Losers Club. So I guess they're all kind of bonding on the fact that they're outcasts, and now they've gotten to something bigger that they just don't know yet. So the losers all meet up at a Chinese restaurant and are very confused as to why. They know they have to return, but they seem to forget why they're returning. They're all having a good time and realize that Stan still hasn't shown up yet. It's only until they all start to realize that when Mike called them, they all seem scared for some reason. The losers are now adults. Bill, played by James McAvoy, Bev, played by Jessica Chastain, Ben, played by Jay Ryan, Eddie, played by James Ransom, Richie, played by Bill Hader, and Stan, played by Andy Bean. They all realize that they were horrified when they got the call from Mike, but they don't know why, and Mike finally reveals why they're back in Derry, and they're not too happy about the fact that Mike lied to them about why they need to come back because they had all forgotten about Pennywise. They had forgotten about Derry. They just knew they had to come back. And now that they're back, they're not too happy. And Richie and Eddie actually consider leaving after the fortune cookies start having horrific and grotesque imagery and things pop out of it. And so that's the last straw for, on top of being lied to, now they're being tormented by Pennywise literally only an hour into being in this town. So yeah, Eddie and Richie are about to, get out of there. But Bill, being the loyal guy he is, stays with Mike because he doesn't want to break his promise. And Mike convinces Bill through like this drug hallucination that I don't want to butcher the pronunciation of the tribe. The Shokopiwa Native American tribes use this thing called the Ritual of Chud to defeat it when it first came to Earth. So now Bill's convinced that there's a way to beat this clown and convinces the rest to stay so they can go fight it as the losers. And at the same time, they also learn about Stanley's death. But I'll get to that in a little bit. So, Bowers and his gang pursue the losers through the sewer, or at least they think they're in there, and one of the gang members, Patrick Hockstetter, is killed by Pennywise. At the same time, a girl by the name of Beverly Marsh, played by Sophia Lillis, is being bullied over rumors of promiscuity, and she joins the group. However, a love triangle kind of starts to form because both Bill and Ben develop feelings for her. They dub themselves the Losers Club, like I said, and they've all encountered some horrific form of it, with the exception of Richie. Whether it be Georgie's ghost, blood that spews out of a sink that only Bev could see, her father couldn't see it, a headless boy, a leper, Mike's parents burning alive because Mike, when he was a kid, had his house caught on fire, and he was helpless to help his parents as they burned alive, and a very creepy painting of a woman playing a flute. So they've all experienced horrific manifestations of this thing called it, and not looking too good because, they're all very scared, and it's revealed that every 27 years is when this thing comes out to play. Because there was an incident with an explosion, and then 27 years later, there's a thing called the Black Spot, and just horrific death and, brutality happened in these events. So, it's now the 27th year after the Black Spot, and it's back, and it's ready to feed on children some more. So, as I said, it's revealed that Stan killed himself, and it's, Stan does this because he knows that his fear of it is just too strong to go back. He made a promise, yes, but it's too much for him. And rather than face his fear, he decides to take the way out and take his own life. And it's weird because Bev seems to know what his wife's about to say when they call her up. They're trying to find out why Stan wasn't there. And when she's about to say, I found him dead in the, Bev says, bathtub at the same time as his wife. And everyone kind of brushes this off, except for Ben, who does hear her. But I'll get to that a little later. So it's weird. How did Bev know where Stan was going to be when he's dead? That's the question. So since they all agree to perform the ritual, Mike explains that they all need to find an artifact that will trace them back to when they were kids. They go to their old clubhouse that they made in the kid timeline and retrieve the shower caps that Stan brought to avoid getting spiders in their hair, to kind of have his artifact since he's not there to retrieve it since he's dead. He tells them to retrace their steps and go to key points, key places they were when they were kids, to find their artifacts to bring back for the ritual. So they determine that Pennywise lives within the sewers, and that's where he retreats to after his year of feeding is over. He retreats to the sewers, and that's how he moves about. That's how he gets to places in the town. Kind of like the basilisk. And so after another attack by Pennywise, in a pretty creepy scene where he comes out of a projector, they venture to the Barrens to finally confront it. And even though they had this huge speech about sticking together, literally the second they step into the house, they get separated and are taunted and tormented by Pennywise. Richie finally getting a haunt from it with him as because he's afraid of clowns. A room filled with clowns and a tiny creepy clown version of himself dead in a casket crawling with maggots. So they all finally come together, but Pennywise is taunting Bill about how he lost Georgie, and Bev impales Pennywise through the head with a fence post, one of those metal ones with like the cool designs at the top that kind of look like an arrowhead. So they think that they got Pennywise, but not really. He kind of retreats. They leave the house. Eddie has a broken arm. Ben's wounds from Henry has ripped open again. And so they've had enough. They're done. They're like, there is no next time. We're not doing this again. We're lucky we got out of there with our lives. And Bev's trying to explain to them that the only reason why we got out of there alive is because we were all together. If we go our separate ways, we're screwed. We're going to get picked off one by one by this clown. And no one listens, and they go off their separate ways. Bev, after being attacked by her sexually abusive father, she incapacitates him, but is then kidnapped by it. So it's time the hunt is on to try to get Bev back before something bad happens. So it looks as though Henry Bowers has survived his apparent death, and he is now in a mental institution after committing patricide. He sees a red balloon floating past his window, which makes him go apeshit, and is broken out by Pennywise and the corpse of Patrick Hotstetter. He gets his knife back and is off to go kill the rest of the losers, since that's what he was instructed to do as a kid. But it turns out all the kids are off, the losers are all off finding their artifacts after they splintered off in the past. Bill retrieves his old bike and gets Georgie's boat from the sewer. Bev retrieves the love letter written to her by Ben, but since her memories are a little foggy, she still thinks Bill wrote it. Ben gets his yearbook page that only one person signed, and that person was Bev. Eddie gets his inhaler. Richie gets an arcade token, and like I said before, they retrieve the shower cap to represent Stan. All of them encountering a reincarnation of it that they encountered when they were a kid, whether it be Bill's hand getting attacked by a bunch of little hands in the sewer, a creepy old woman who now inhabits Bev's old house. It's like kind of like a fire demon version of Bev who chases Ben into his locker. Eddie encounters the leper again, although even more and more rotted and deteriorated than he was in the past. Richie encounters a gigantic Paul Bunyan statue. So they're all starting to, get reminded of who this Pennywise is. And Richie, yet again, tries to flee town. So Pennywise is really breaking the losers up when they really should be sticking together, because that's when they're at their strongest. So with the news that Bev has been captured by Pennywise, the losers reassemble and they go back down to the Barrens and go into the sewers for, the final encounter. This is it. And when they get there, they get to its lair, they notice a pile of decaying circus props and children's toys, and a bunch of floating children. They notice Bev, who's now in a catatonic state, and they don't know why. And Bill runs off because he sees Georgie's yellow coat run off in the distance. But the rest of the losers are focused on getting Bev down, and she won't wake up, so Bill kisses Bev, and she is awoken by, I guess, True Love's kiss. I guess True Love's kiss, that old trope. And they go off to try to find Bill, who is confronting the ghost of Georgie, and kind of slips in something that would really test to see if it was Georgie or not by calling the boat he and seeing if Georgie would go along with it. And when Georgie does say, yeah, I couldn't keep up with him, that gave away, no, you called the boat she, so you're not Georgie. And he finally kills the demons that have been haunting him over the death of his brother. I forgot to mention that Henry now becomes possessed by it, kind of, and he goes and is instructed to kill his father and go and kill the rest of the losers. I forgot to completely mention that he goes to the Barrens and actually attacks them. And Mike shoves Henry down a well, and he's apparently dead. I don't know how you could survive a fall like that, but who knows with movies like this? I have no idea. So when Bill retrieves Georgie's boat, I should say, he encounters a little boy named Dean who lives in the same house that Bill grew up with when he was a kid, and he develops kind of like he kind of develops a protective coat around this Dean kid because he doesn't want another thing to happen, because Dean has revealed that he heard clowns, laughter, and children's voices in his tub drain. And he's like, you need to get out of this town ASAP. And the kid goes off to the local festival. However, a skateboard comes down the stairs of the place that the losers are staying that says, you weren't there for Georgie, you're not going to be here for this kid either. This causes Bill to run off to the festival and follow this kid into the House of Mirrors, where he's helpless to save this kid as Pennywise devours him. This kind of causes Bill to go insane because it's like, I couldn't protect Georgie, I couldn't even protect this kid, and he goes off to kill it alone. Because he thinks all this is his fault, so he's going there out of guilt. But the losers convince him, dude, you can't go down there alone. We have to stick together. Losers always stick together. And they go down into the sewer to fight him off. But I forgot to mention that Henry Bowers does end up attacking them at the library where they're all supposed to meet before Bill goes on this rampage to go kill it by himself. And Henry Bowers actually tries to kill Mike, but Richie gets the best of him and kills him after Henry Bowers almost kills Eddie back at the hotel as well. So Henry Bowers is out of the picture. It's time to go face it once and for all. So it's revealed that Georgie was, of course, Pennywise in disguise, and he goes to attack the group, but they've all shown now that they're not afraid of it anymore, and they brutally beat the creature until it is weak and pathetic and is gonna starve in its hibernation, as Bill says. He finally comes to terms with Georgie's death after seeing some scraps of Georgie's raincoat, and he's comforted by the losers. And they all are out in a field, and Bev talks about a vision she had about seeing all of them as adults coming back to fight it. And Bill makes them make a blood oath that if it returns when they're adults, they will come back. And they make a blood oath, and they all go their separate ways. Bev is going to move to Portland to live with her aunt since her father is abusive, sexually, physically, all that stuff. And at the end, they reveal their feelings for each other, and Bill and Bev, I should say, and they show that love with a kiss. So, in 27 years, we'll see if the losers return. Who knows? Maybe they will, maybe they won't. I don't know. We'll have to find out. So that was It Chapter 1. And I liked it. I thought it was really, really good. Tonally, I thought it was a little crazy. Sometimes, they had like this fun, goofy montage. They had, funny jokes, childish humor, adult humor, scares, gore. It was all over the place tonally, but it was still very, very solid. I love the performances from the kids, especially Finn Wolford as Richie. However, they did a couple things that kind of ticked me off a little bit. For one thing, they didn't have Eddie use his inhaler to kill it the first time. I like how they were all beating on him, but they could have at least weakened him a little bit by, doing the whole battery acid thing, because that really showed the imagination of the kids when it came to it. It's like, this is battery acid. In the original, I'm not going to, keep going in the original to compare it, but in the original, and in the book, it's like, this is battery acid. You spray it, it's not battery acid, obviously, but the kids believed hard enough that it was battery acid, and it burnt a hole in Pennywise's face. So that was kind of annoying that they didn't have that. But other than that, extremely solid atmosphere, very good scares, especially with the lady in the painting. I loved that scene. It's kind of stupid that Stan just doesn't bring it up to anybody. He's just like, yeah, all right, I'm not gonna talk about that one, but whatever, I'm gonna leave. And I completely forgot to mention that Chosen Jacobs plays Mike. I apologize, I forgot to say that. But overall, in terms of a reboot, I do believe it's more solid than the original. But my biggest gripe actually is with Pennywise. Not with the performance. Bill Skarsgård knocks this performance out of the park. He captures the creepiness of Pennywise, but this is one of my biggest pet peeves in horror movies, when they try to make things too scary. You know? Take Annabelle, for example. If you've seen the original doll of Annabelle, you would know it's just a Raggedy Ann doll. Nothing scary about a Raggedy Ann doll, but if you add all the paranormal elements of what makes Annabelle Annabelle, it gets 10 times creepier. With Annabelle the doll in the movies, you know that thing's gonna do something horrifying. I mean, look at it. You look at it. Look at it. You know it's gonna do something scary. With this one, if it did do something scary, it would just jump 1,000,000%. So what made Tim Curry so horrifying, even albeit goofy, was he was a clown. He was an actual clown. He was funny. He was annoying. You know, he had that lighthearted spirit of a clown while also being extremely sinister and creepy once the scares happened. Bill Skarsgård couldn't lure in anybody. Nobody. I don't even think he can lure in a blind person, because I think even a blind person would see that this guy is horrifically creepy. So that's my one gripe with Pennywise's design. I'm alright with it now because, you know, it's been 2 years since that movie came out. But that was one of my biggest gripes when I first saw the design of Pennywise. I was like, really? You're going that sinister? I know you're trying to get the shock factor and the scare factor, but tone it down a bit. That's all I have to say. Yeah, all in all, fantastic horror movie. If you haven't seen it yet, if you're a fan of Stephen King, if you've seen the original miniseries of It, and you want to see this incarnation, definitely check it out. I highly recommend it. It's got some fantastic performances by all. And yeah, that comes to my final verdict of a 3.5 out of 5 stars. So yeah, that's all I have to say about It Chapter 1. Extremely solid horror movie. If you're a fan of horror, if you're a fan of Stephen King, if you're a fan of creepy killer clowns, check this movie out. Sorry about that cut. I just died. So yeah, that's all I have to say. And make sure you guys stay tuned next week for my number 3 on my top 10 favorite films of all time. And until next time, that's a wrap, everybody. So Mike's artifact is the rock that Bev threw at Henry Bowers way back when they were kids. That Henry Bowers was about to kill Mike, and then a rock struck him in the face. So that's the artifact that Mike, I don't know how he knew that was the rock, but maybe he kept it ever since he was a kid. And they performed the ritual of Chud. Nothing happens. Nothing works. And Pennywise, now forming into this gigantic spider, you know, talks to Mike and says, well, why didn't it work? Tell them, Mike, and reveals that the people who tried to perform the ritual of Chud all got murdered. And this was just kind of a placebo way to get the losers into gaining hope and fighting the monster, because he felt that they weren't going to stay if they didn't have that chance. Of course, that pisses them off. And Pennywise terrorizes the group, putting them in horrific scenarios. Richie saves his friends by taunting Pennywise, but he, you know, activates his deadlights, which put Bev in a catatonic state so many years back, and puts Richie in that same state. Eddie throws that fence post at Pennywise again, but it doesn't quite work, and Eddie is stabbed through the chest. And so now the race is on to save Eddie's life and to kill it at the same time. So now they realize that to kill it, all they need to do is make him feel small. Make him feel like he's not this being of immense power. He's just a pathetic clown. And they eventually reduce him to the size of a baby, and they're able to rip his heart out and finally kill it. Unfortunately, Eddie succumbs to his injuries, and due to much protesting from Richie about leaving Eddie's body there, they have to. They can't carry him out through the passage they came down in. So they must leave Eddie there while the Barons are all collapsing around them. So it seems as though it is finally dead, and they all jump off the cliff into the washing hole that they all jumped in when they were kids, to wash off the scars and the blood and the dirt and the grime that they all encountered in the sewers. And if they look at their hand, their hands, I should say, the scars that they couldn't quite explain why they had when they were adults were gone from the blood oath they made when they were kids. And yeah, it ends with Bev and Bill becoming a couple because Bev, finally realizes that it was Ben who wrote the poem. And I don't think any amount of years passing and memories fading is going to make her forget that. Richie is somewhat revealed to have feelings for Eddie. It shows him carving his initials on a bridge where everyone carves their initials on. And it's revealed that initial is Eddie. And they all go off their separate ways. And it's revealed that Stan's reason for committing suicide was actually to give them a better chance of fighting it. I think he knew that all of them were going to be stronger than him in this situation. They were going to fight harder and they wouldn't be afraid. He was going to be too scared. It was going to hold him back. So he was like, this is me giving you guys a chance to actually defeat this thing. And yeah, they all start to forget all about Derry, most likely, and forget about themselves and the losers. And yeah, it seems as though Pennywise has been defeated. And that was it, Chapter 2. As a sequel, it definitely does a couple things great, but it also does a lot of things wrong, in my opinion. For one, they add stupid subplots that weren't in the book. Look at the book. Look at the book. It's huge. You're telling me that you can't come up with content with a book this big? First of all, again, when Eddie dies, he doesn't use his inhaler like he didn't do in the first one. He throws the thing through it. But that's what, again, added to the imagination of it. There's also that story with Dean, the kid. That wasn't in the first movie. Like, we really need a reason for Bill to be vengeful towards it. It killed his brother. I'm pretty sure that's all you need. I don't know about you, but if someone killed my little brother, I wouldn't need some other kid who reminds me of my little brother to be like, oh, now I really have to go kill this thing because it killed this kid I don't know. So it was just kind of stupid. And the whole Richie might be gay subplot was just unnecessary. It didn't add anything to his character, and it wasn't hinted at once in the first film at all. If it was hinted at in the first film, it would make sense because it's like, is Richie gay? I don't know. And then this movie would capitalize on that and then maybe show, okay, yeah, he definitely is. But the fact that there was no mention of it, yeah, Richie and Eddie picked on each other, but they're little kids. They always pick on each other. They're friends. And there was no hint, there was no indication of Richie being gay. So the fact that they just kind of hinted at that with, the whole Richie and Eddie thing and that flashback where Richie wants to keep playing the arcade Street Fighter with that guy and the guy's like, yo, stay away from me. I'm not going to say the word because I hate that word. Just like, why? Why did you need to do that? Why did you need to pander to, PC nonsense and just have this character be gay when it wasn't mentioned at all in the first one? If it was mentioned in the first one, I wouldn't care. But it's just brought up here out of nowhere, and it's stupid. They also... Another thing is, back in the first book, in the miniseries, when Mike calls everybody, you see the people around them's reaction when they're like, I have to go back to Derry. They're like, what, are you crazy? Why would you want to go back to that crap hole of a town? They don't show any of that. And Bill's wife doesn't even go to Derry. Bill's wife, it's like when you're cleaning a window and there's like when a bug splats on your windshield. It's just like, it's there, and you're like, all right, it's gone. She's barely in the movie. She doesn't count. And they also completely messed up one of the biggest crucial elements to Bill's wife. She has to look like Bev, and she looks nothing like Bev. Because the point of this adult life is that they're marrying and doing things that are similar to their encounters in Derry. Bill marries a woman who looks like Bev because he was in love with Bev when he was a kid. Eddie marries a fat, overbearing woman because that reminds him of his mother. Bev marries an abusive man because that reminds her of her father. They don't know it reminds them of these things, but that's just how it works. And they mess that up completely. But yeah, like, Bev doesn't even go, Bev, not Bev. Bill's wife doesn't even go to Derry to see what's going on with her husband. That's a crucial part of the books and stuff. That's how the movie ends, when Bill takes her on a ride on Silver when she's in the catatonic state after being captured by Pennywise. And that's not in the movie. And even though it wasn't in the first one, in the books, Bev's husband goes to Derry for the sole purpose of killing Bev after she fights back in retaliation. It's, and they completely ignored that too. I know it wasn't in the original, but I thought that maybe this would be the exception. But it's not. And so they kind of messed up on those important details. Performances were fantastic, I should say. And the casting for the adults was incredible. My favorites being Jay Ryan as Ben and James Ranson as Eddie. Those two were like spot on. I mean, look at this. Look at this. This is perfect. This is perfect casting. I also love Teach Grant as Henry Bowers as an adult because he captures, even though it's a short-lived role, he really captures the insanity that drove Henry Bowers to kill his father and come kill the losers, and why he's so excited to get back into doing that in the first place. So all in all, a good sequel, but they did a couple things wrong that knocked it down a peg or two, and that's why this film is going to be getting a 2.5 stars out of 5 stars. So, yeah, that's all I have to say about It Chapter 2. See it to see the conclusion, but just keep in mind that they're going to do a couple things. They're going to change things that might tick you off just a tad. Make sure you guys stay tuned next week for my number 3 review on my top 10 films of all time, my personal favorites. And until next time, that's a wrap, everyone.